All right, welcome back to another episode of the Podium Pushers Podcast with Justin and Brandon. We are here to talk about the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and what a race we just witnessed in Baku. Started off a little bit slow, and then after the first pit stop, things kicked off. We had a fight for the lead, we had a battle for the podium, we had a penultimate lap crash. Brandon, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Well done, Baku. It was a great race. Um, yeah, it truly was a race that had it all, from fighting for the lead. I mean, everything you just mentioned. It was great. There was strategy involved, one stop, two stop. It was a great race.
Well, if you were Daniel Ricciardo and V-Carb, you had the no stop in there as well. But it truly was a great race. We should have known with the way Formula One is going in 2024 that Baku would deliver for us. Let's jump right into our reactions to it. What is your one sentence rundown from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix?
My one sentence rundown is Oscar Piastri is here. He has arrived. He got a race win that wasn't tainted by team orders. And it was just a great race from Oscar, a great weekend from him with his qualifying performance as well. And then obviously the race, just kind of running away with it, and great defense for like 30 laps, which was crazy. So it was an awesome race from Oscar. He has arrived. He is here. He is no longer the up and coming star in Formula One. He is one of the big boys, in my opinion.
Yeah, just the mood around this win was so much better than his first win. Everyone seemed so much happier. He seemed happier. His race engineer seemed happier. Lando Norris seemed happier with it. It was just the mood was much improved from Oscar Piastri's first win, but this was definitely the drive of his career to be able to make that move on Charles Leclerc for the lead. Very much reminded me of a fellow Australian driver in that same corner a few years back. And then to defend from Charles Leclerc for that long, just incredibly impressive. I mean, Charles Leclerc is no slouch of a driver. Obviously, that Ferrari is a much improved car, and for Oscar Piastri to be able to fend off Charles Leclerc by himself with Lando Norris further down the field for 30 laps to end the race. I mean, drive of his career, and he's only a year and a half into Formula One. So that is a scary, scary thought for what he could become in the rest of his career.
Yeah, I mean, he's 23 years old. He's very young, younger than me, which is crazy. Um, but yeah, he's already putting together a great career. He's a two-time race winner, which, a lot of drivers can't even say. For example, Logan Sargent, he never won a race. Um, but anyway, yeah, it was an awesome race from Oscar.
I'm sure we'll get into Logan Sargent a little bit later and how his point tally lines up with his replacement, Franco Colapinto. But my one sentence rundown is that Formula One fans need to be reminded of what a racing incident is. Obviously, Sergio Perez and Carlos Sainz crashing on the second to last lap of this Grand Prix. Very unfortunate incident. Sergio Perez was probably having his best weekend of the season, and to see it end in the wall like that is just so unfortunate. Carlos Sainz had a great weekend as well and was coming on strong at the end of that race to fight for that podium. He really wasn't in the contention. He was pretty solid P4, and then at the end of the race drove his way up into that P4, close to P3 position to fight for a podium. And immediately after this incident online, everyone online is posting, this was Sergio's fault. This was Carlos's fault. This was textbook racing incident. And the FIA agrees with me, so I have to be right on this. But if you look at their onboards, neither of them are moving their steering wheel. They're just going on straight lines that are unfortunately converging at some point. Yes, Carlos Sainz could have gone straighter, close to the wall, but his racing line for all of the previous laps was the line that he was going on. Sergio Perez, yes, he could have gone more to the left. There was a whole lot of room there, but he's fighting for a podium position. He wants Charlie Leclerc's slipstream, and he's going in a straight line. Neither driver is turning towards each other. Neither driver caused that incident. It's just unfortunate the way that it happened. And I think it was textbook racing incident. Really, no one's to blame. And it was an unfortunate way to end the race for both of those drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, I've watched the onboards, I've watched the helicopter cam replay of it, and it's just a racing incident. And we could sit here and say, yeah, Sergio was behind, so he should have like giving Carlos more room, or Carlos should have been checking his mirrors, more to see if Sergio was there. I mean, but it's like you said, these guys were fighting for a podium spot, and you know, Sergio especially, he's got to get these results for the team, especially in the Constructors' Championship and all that stuff, and for his career. But yeah, textbook racing incident. Really unfortunate that it happened. My jaw was on the ground when I was watching that. It was crazy. But you know, that's Formula One for you.
I think the best part about that incident was that video F1 posted to Instagram of them walking back to the paddock together after they crashed into each other, and they're just shoulder to shoulder. Neither one of them saying a word. Carlos Sainz has this deadpan look on his face. That video was hilarious. Let's talk about Sergio Perez a little bit more in this incident because, yes, fully a racing incident. We agree on that. The stewards agree on that. But it's more cost for the team. It's loss of Constructors' Championship points. Sergio Perez is eighth in the Drivers' Championship now. If there is any blame placed on Sergio Perez by the team, which it doesn't sound like there was immediately, Christian Horner was very defensive of Sergio Perez immediately after the race. But now that they go back and look at it, if there's any blame placed on Sergio by the team, is this it for him at Red Bull?
I mean, potentially. And the way I think about it, yes, it's a racing incident, but if I'm Christian Horner, if I'm Helmut Marko, and I'm, looking at Sergio to see is he going to fit in the team continuing forward, it's like he has to be more, he might have to be more aware of the situation that we're in, right? Now, McLaren has a 20-point lead in the Constructors' Championship. And this was, a track that Sergio is very good at. This is a great opportunity for him to score a podium when Red Bull really needed it. And unfortunately, he crashed. So it's like, yes, it was a racing incident, but also, how do you coach Sergio Perez and make sure he's not putting himself in these situations? Because, I mean, at some level, you do have to put some amount of blame on Sergio, whether even though it's a racing incident, it can be a very small amount of blame, but it's like in the bigger picture, was he aware? Was he doing something to benefit the team, which truly right now is his job, is to benefit and support the team in the Constructors' Championship. And was he fully aware of that in that situation? I don't know. I can't say because I wasn't in the cockpit with Sergio, but I think it's at some level this definitely negatively affects his career. And if we're talking about street tracks that are left that Sergio is good at, we've got like one or two. So, and this was a great opportunity for him that at some level was partially, his fault, even though it was a racing incident.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you look at it, you can clearly see in the steward's notes that some blame was apportioned to both drivers, and that's why it was called a racing incident. They said Carlos could have done this, Sergio could have done this. So there is some blame that can be put on Sergio Perez. My main concern with this is not the cost, is not the constructors' points that he lost, which, yes, he did give away 15 or 12 constructors' points, and even if he finished P4, it would have been a great weekend, finishing ahead of Max, all of those things. My main concern is his confidence because this weekend, Sergio Perez finally looked like a confident driver again. We heard him on the radio in qualifying, and he had this eagerness in his voice that we haven't heard in a long time. And he beat Max in qualifying for the first time since Miami of last year, and he was beating Max comprehensively all weekend. This was an incredible weekend from Sergio Perez. And we've got a track like Singapore coming up where he's been good in the past. He's won that race in the past. If this has any effect on his confidence and he misses an opportunity to perform at one of his best tracks at Singapore coming up, I'm more worried about the effects it could have on the rest of the year, his confidence in the car, him saying, I was confident I was having a good weekend and I still scored no points. Like just the mental defeat that could come from that. I'm more worried about that for Sergio Perez than the actual effects of this crash on the cost cap or the constructor standings.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like ultimately a loss in confidence for him is going to negatively impact all that. So we've seen it time and time again. When Sergio gets in his head, when things like this happen, he just doesn't perform for like 4 or 5 races. And you think about Singapore coming up. You think about his home race in Mexico. He's performed very well there in the past. Podiums. He's never won the race, but he's gotten podiums and performed well there. It's like if this carries over to those races, like, I mean, this could be the end for Sergio.
Yeah, well, hopefully not for his sake. And it's just truly so unfortunate because this was an incredible weekend from Sergio, and for it to just have ended the way that it did, and to be having these conversations about his career at Red Bull because of a crash that wasn't predominantly his fault is just super unfortunate for him. This is the point of the podcast where we would usually ask, is the championship back on, or has McLaren continued to give it away? So I have just decided to dub this our weekly championship recap. So here's what we got going on in the championship right now. Lando Norris is now 59 points behind Max Verstappen. Charles Leclerc is 78 points behind Max Verstappen after a very impressive weekend from Charles. McLaren have taken the lead of the Constructors' Championship by 20 points, but Ferrari are only 51 points back. Obviously, Carlos Sainz DNFing hurts their Constructors' Championship chances as well, but 51 points in a Constructors is still not a very big gap. How are you feeling about the championship? Can Lando Norris still catch up? Have McLaren locked down the constructors? How you feeling right now?
I mean, for the constructors, I think McLaren has done enough to lock it up. I mean, it's unfortunate. So I I think that I think they've done enough. It seems like 20 points is really kind of insurmountable for Red Bull right now because of how fast that McLaren is and how unfortunate Sergio's luck is. So I think McLaren has locked it in for the constructors. I think Ferrari is definitely still in the constructors championship. That Carlos DNF really did set them back quite a bit, but I mean, there's still quite a few races left. So strong performances from Ferrari up at the front could definitely bring them into contention for definitely second place, potentially the constructors title. And as far as the drivers' championship goes, it's a little bit further out, I think, than we were last week in this situation. But I think it's definitely still possible for Lando. Charles made up some good ground as well. I think he was like 89 points or so behind
78.
last week, but or
78 it
before.
is now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but 78. I mean, that's good ground. It's still definitely possible. So I think it's still all to play for, but we'll have to see how the cars continue to kind of like develop and how does Max do and towards the end of the year. So we'll see.
Yeah, obviously we haven't talked about Lando Norris yet. Qualifying P17, not what you want to see whenever you're fighting for a championship. Some of it was his fault. He had the mistake at the last corner, but also very unfortunate with the yellow flags. He was on a used set of tires, and if he was on a new, maybe that would have given him that gap to finish the lap and still make it out. So, yes, his fault, but also a very high amount of bad luck that led to him getting eliminated. Had some disqualification and power unit changes for others that elevated him to P15. That helped him out. But great drive from Lando, to finish ahead of Max Verstappen, still gain points on the championship. The result is flattered a little bit by the two DNFs, but either way, would have finished in front of Max Verstappen. Great drive from Lando. Good to see him gain points in the Drivers' Championship. It is that tough feeling where it's like, yes, he gained ground, but was it enough? I mean, he only finished one place in front of Max. He needs to be winning Grand Prix with Max down this far to truly be eating into this championship lead. But there's still 7 races and 3 sprints left. And so I think it is still all to play for. We are seeing that gap slowly get down, and it's in the 50s, which in my mind feels a lot closer than the 60s. Like you could tell me 59 points and 61 points. 59 feels a lot closer in my mind. So it's truly still on. As far as Red Bull goes, they should be encouraged by this weekend. I mean, yes, they had a little bit more pace. They're slowly figuring out their upgrades. There is that 4 week gap between Singapore and Austin, which they are planning to bring some upgrades to Austin. They can feel better about it. Sergio Perez was fighting for a podium. Max Verstappen was ahead of George Russell for most of the race. They should feel a little bit better about where they stand after this weekend. I do think the Constructors' Championship is probably too far gone, but as far as drivers go, having their car kind of get back into contention should help Max Verstappen. Unfortunately, we're going to Singapore, and we've seen Red Bull struggle at Singapore over the past 2 years. I don't have a lot of confidence in them this year. I mean, we've seen how their car doesn't fare well over bumpy tracks, tracks with heavy curb usage. Singapore, as a street track, is going to have a lot of those characteristics. And so I'm pretty concerned about them from Singapore. If Lando Norris and or Charles Leclerc can have great races in Singapore, I think the championship is definitely still wide open because I really don't expect a strong weekend from Red Bull and Max Verstappen next weekend.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, and this is a track that we've seen Charles perform well out in the past and Ferrari perform well out in general. I mean, Carlos won the race here last year. So I think it's definitely, absolutely still on. What I envision happening with Red Bull this week is you have one car in the latter stages of the points, maybe like seventh, P7 to P10. And then we have one car outside the points is what I'm kind of thinking will happen with Red Bull this weekend. They just don't seem to be able to like find the setup really well to make good overtakes in Singapore. And I know Singapore's a street track. It's a little narrower, harder to overtake in some places, but it seems to suit Ferrari really well. And we'll have to see how McLaren does, but I think they'll definitely be in contention.
Yeah, save it for our predictions podcast. We can't be giving out spoilers right now. We're talking about Azerbaijan right now, but yeah, Red Bull and Singapore and their setup just seems really weird, and it has seemed really weird over the past few years, and I don't have any confidence for them this year. Let's talk about some young drivers who had some success. Franco Colapinto. Oh boy, what a weekend he had. Incredible performance from him all around. Qualified P9 ahead of Alex Albon, something Logan Sargent never managed to do in his entire career. Franco Colapinto does it in his second race at arguably one of the hardest tracks on the calendar. Man, and yes, Alex Albon didn't get to do a second lap because they released his car in qualifying with a fan and some dry ice still on top of it, and he couldn't make it in time. But Franco still finished P8, had an incredible weekend. What does this really mean for Alex Albon? Yes, we could say Franco deserves a full-time drive and there's no seats available for next year. He will be in contentions for a seat down the line. His name will definitely be in conversations based on what he has done in that Williams. But this whole time, we've wondered about Alex Albon. He's had Nicholas Latifi and Logan Sargent for competition. No hate on those drivers. I could not even come close to what they do in a racing car, much less, anything. But they're not the cream of the crop as far as Formula One drivers go. They're never world championship material, all of that things, even though Nicholas Latifi played a huge role in the 2021 World Championship, but his name is not on the trophy. But now we get to see Alex Albon against this young, unproven driver who turns out to be pretty quick, and he gets out qualified immediately, pretty much matched in the race. What does this mean for Alex Albon and how we view him as a driver?
I mean, I think this is a turning point for Alex. He's got to really step it up. I mean, he's going to be this is a great opportunity for him to compete against a driver, kind of acclimate himself to what is it like to have a teammate that, is fast. I mean, because that's the situation he's going to be in next year with Carlos Sainz. I mean, Carlos is a proven race winner. He has a great long career behind him, and so does Alex, but it's not the same as Carlos's. And so I think this is a great opportunity for Alex to just step it up head to head. What does it look like to outqualify your teammate consistently with somebody who has the chance of outqualifying you, I guess? And what does it mean to race your teammate in race situations, clean and fair? How do you work together with somebody who's got good pace, that kind of thing? So I think it's a great learning opportunity for Alex, and it'll tell us where he actually stacks up.
Yeah, I think one word you said that really stood out to me, and that was consistency, because Carlos Sainz is one of the most consistent drivers on the grid. He's always there, bagging those solid points. Unfortunate to say this after he just crashed out of a potential podium place, but that is beyond the point. For the rest of his career at Ferrari, that is what we have described him as. He's been a little bit behind Charles in pace on most weekends, but he has been consistent. He's been reliable. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And I think this year for Alex Albon, he's been a little more sporadic. Last year, he was a very consistent driver, getting points whenever that Williams could, but this year he's not bagging those consistent performances P8 to P12 as much as we would expect him to. So I think that's something Alex Albon will have to work on and improve for next year if he does want to stack up well against Carlos Sainz. But I'm not hitting the panic button on Alex Albon just yet. I'm more ready to praise Franco Colapinto than say Alex Albon is not as good as we thought. Also, got to shout out Ollie Behrman. What a performance from him, out qualifying Nico Hulkenberg, who has been the better Haas driver all year. Obviously, he is no slouch. And then to bring home a point, that is impressive as well. Obviously, helped out by the crash, but you got to be in the position to make it happen when the opportunities arise. And he was there, very deservedly got the point. Great weekend from him. I'm excited to see him next year in that Haas for sure.
Yeah, and cool thing about Ollie is he's the first driver in Formula One history to score points for two different teams in the same season in his first two Formula One starts. So, I mean, that's kind of a really specific stat, but it's something that Ollie will probably hang on to for quite a while. So,
Yeah, that is pretty funny. He also did it with two different numbers. Obviously, he has selected his number for next year, but teams have their reserve driver number. So he had a different number for Ferrari as he did with Haas. So you could make these crazy combinations of Ollie Behrman being the only substitute driver to score points for two different teams with two different numbers and two different starts while he's in the same position in two different standings. He's 16th in F1 and F2. So crazy stuff for Ollie Behrman. I'm excited to see what he does against Esteban Ocon next year. Let's move into a new segment in the Podium Pushers podcast where we are recapping all of our predictions. Previously, we have just recapped our bold predictions, but we make a whole lot more predictions than that on our prediction podcast. We're going to go over them in this podcast, see how we did. I need to tabulate the entire score for the full year now. We'll see who comes out on top. But I would have to imagine in my mind that we've got to be pretty close because some weekends we're on it and then other weekends, I mean, we have gone like 0 for 4 plenty of times, so it has got to be close. But let us jump right into it. Podium pusher of the weekend. I said Charles Leclerc. I think yes. I think he totally was. Obviously, podium pusher of the weekend doesn't mean best driver all around, best driver of the weekend. It just means he had a great weekend and deserves praise for it. I think yes. Pole position, second place. That Ferrari is quick, but I don't think it is the quickest car on the grid. I think they're still behind McLaren. So to qualify P1, finish P2, I think Charles Leclerc is a yes for podium pusher.
I absolutely agree. It was a fantastic weekend from him, especially qualifying. I mean, you hear his team radio in qualifying. His race engineer says there was really no chance for anyone else, and that's how it was. I mean, he laid down the mark, and then he ended up beating it. And Oscar was in P2 by like 0.3. I mean, there's no other person around Baku that qualifies as well as Charles does. So absolutely, podium pusher of the weekend.
And who have you gone for?
I went for Fernando Alonso. I also think yes, Fernando qualified really well. Ended up finishing pretty high up. Got some good points at P7. Pretty good points for Aston Martin when they really need him right now. So yeah, it was a great weekend from Fernando.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely smacked around Lance Stroll, which is something that he is becoming a trend again. Backmark of the weekend, I've gone for Esteban Ocon. Had that puncture in qualifying, which was his own doing, and ruined the laps of Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, and had them both eliminated, and then did not have a great race either. Obviously, you qualify P20 around Baku, probably not going to score points, but yeah, he was soundly beat by Pierre this weekend, so I'm going to say yes for that one as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's one of those races and drivers where it's like, man, there's so much else going on that I don't even know what he did. So it must not have been a good weekend because we kind of talked about everybody else who did a good job. So yeah, totally agree. I went with Alex Albon, which kind of a tough situation. I think Alex had a great weekend, honestly. And I think his weekend would have been even better had he been able to get his second Q3 lap in. He probably would have outqualified Franco, maybe. But yeah, so unfortunately for me, Alex had a great weekend. But it was a pure vibes prediction, so sometimes they don't always pan out. But yeah.
Q3 in points, great weekend for Alex Albon. Unfortunate for you, but very fortunate for him. Pole prediction. I went with Charles Leclerc. That's a point. Let's go.
I went with Oscar Piastri, which he was the closest driver other than Charles, and I wanted to pick someone other than Charles, just for the sake of being different and giving a vote of confidence to a different driver other than Charles. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for me, but Oscar was the closest out of anybody else. So
Yeah, I mean, great pick to get P2, pick the driver who is going to be second. That's impressive from us to pick the top two drivers, but no point for you. Third place, I went with Oscar Piastri, and that is incorrect.
and in third place, I went with Lando Norris. Also incorrect.
Closer than we thought after Saturday, but incorrect. Second place, I went with Lando Norris, also incorrect.
And I went with Oscar Piastri. It was close, but not correct.
And first place, Charles Leclerc, didn't happen.
Did not happen. I also went with Charles Leclerc. I switched the top two though, so I was pretty close.
Yeah, a lot of close predictions for you this weekend. We'll have to lock it in for next week. Two bold predictions. First one, I went with Sergio Perez does not reach Q3. Sergio decided to have the best weekend of the season, so incorrect on that one. And I said at least one Haas driver scores points. Yes, I got it. Ollie Behrman finishes P10, brings home a point for me. And I said in our predictions podcast that I wanted to leave it open-ended because I didn't want to write off Ollie Behrman. And he delivered for me, had the better weekend of the Haas drivers. So, boom, points with Ollie Behrman.
Absolutely, yeah. Ollie had a great weekend. He definitely delivered for you when you needed him to. So that's great. My first prediction was both Aston Martins into Q3. It was close-ish, but that did not happen. And then Max Verstappen finishes outside the top five in the race. It was looking really good right up there until the end. And then he finished in the top five. Actually, P5. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was so close to getting that point. Lance Stroll qualified P15, so I don't know if I'd say close for that first one, but Fernando Alonso did get in there. The Aston Martin had pace. Unfortunately, one of their drivers did not. The fans, Rafi RP, said neither Red Bull would reach Q3. They both did, so that didn't happen. Rosa Cabero 6234 said a battle at the front of the field for position. Oh boy, is that correct? I want to give him 2 points because what a prediction that was. And then at Ferret Baldi says Yuki Tsunoda has his best result of the season. That didn't happen. He unfortunately DNF'd after getting Lance Strolled on the first lap. Also kind of a racing incident because Yuki could have left more room. He did kind of pinch him in, but still Lance Stroll up the inside. You just got to default say that was Lance Stroll's fault. But I think a great week all around from predictions from us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were very close on a lot of things that didn't hit. So, I mean, I think that bodes well for next week. We'll see.
Absolutely. Singapore is coming up this weekend. We've got another chance to have some great predictions. But that is all we have got for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, another banger in the 2024 Formula One season. Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts before we leave these lovely people?
Man, I think it's going to be another great weekend. Singapore has delivered the last couple of years, and I think it's going to be another great weekend. I mean, we've got Ferrari and McLaren up front, so it's all to play for.
Yeah, it was arguably the best race of last year, and now that we're having this banger season, watch it be an absolute snooze fest. And Max Verstappen leads from lights to flag, and we just see all championships go out the window. Hopefully, that is not what happens. Hopefully, we have a great weekend in Singapore. My parting podium thought is there's only one more race until Austin, which makes me super excited. Somehow, it is still 5 weeks away. We have another 4 week gap. But do not worry, the Podium Pushers will be here with a lot of content during that gap, so we will make sure you are entertained and all caught up on everything Formula One in that gap, while we unfortunately have to wait another month with no Grand Prix racing. But as always, thank you for listening to another episode of the Podium Pushers podcast. As always, follow us on social media wherever you're listening or watching. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of the places you can find us, and we would appreciate any support. We already do appreciate all of your support and just super thankful for each and every person that watches and listens to our content. We will see you later in the week as we predict the Singapore Grand Prix. See ya.
See ya.